For 7 winters, Liv Parker lived in a world without sound. Her mother carried her from clinic to clinic, praying for a miracle that never came. Dozens of specialists, endless tests, and bills stacked higher than the snowdrifts outside their apartment. All for the same answer. Nobody knew how to fix the silence. Then, on a night when the cold cut like glass, a stray 12-year-old boy with nothing in his pockets but courage stepped toward her, placed his trembling hand near her ear, and did what trained doctors had failed to do for years. In less than a minute, the quiet world around her shattered, and Liv heard her mother's voice for the first time since she was a toddler. But what an FBI agent did for that homeless boy moments later, that's the part no headline ever told you. Before we begin, make sure you subscribe to Angels in Uniform and tell us in the comments where you're watching from. Ready? Snow had a way of swallowing sound in Evergreen, as if the town itself sometimes wished to keep its secrets buried beneath the white hush of winter. FBI Special Agent Noah Reddick had grown used to that silence, though it never stopped reminding him of all the moments in his life where quiet meant danger. Noah was a tall man in his late 30s, his frame shaped by years of tactical work. The steady shoulders, the strong stance, the slight forward lean of someone who had learned to enter rooms prepared for anything. The cold had reddened the line of stubble along his jaw, and a small scar cut through his left eyebrow, a faint reminder of a case where he had been a second too late. His Navy FBI cold weather jacket was dusted with snow, and beneath it, a thick gray sweater fought to keep warmth close to his skin. He stood beside his bureau vehicle, adjusting the radio, when he felt the leash twitch, then tighten, then pull hard. Atlas, his German Shepherd K9, usually lay calmly beside him during patrol. Atlas was a 5-year-old working dog with a black and tan coat and a distinctive silver-shaped marking at his chest that gleamed faintly against the street lamp whenever the snow shifted. He carried himself with the dignified alertness of a creature who had seen too many emergencies to mistake instinct for noise. When Atlas stiffened, it was never random. Tonight, he rose in one fluid motion, ears rigid, tail stiff, nose cutting the air like a blade dividing scent. Noah recognized the change immediately. Atlas only reacted this way to one thing: fear. Not adult fear, the fear of a child. Noah scanned the park, a dim circle of light cast by flickering lamps blurred by snowfall. That was when he saw her, the little girl in the red coat. She sat on a swing, her small figure curled inward, her left hand gripping the metal chain while her right palm pressed tightly against her ear. Her hair, brown with soft curls, hung against her cheek as she tilted her head, and her lips trembled without making a sound. Her boots barely brushed the snow beneath her, as if she didn't even feel the cold creeping through her clothes. Noah instinctively stepped forward. Before he could issue a command, Atlas tore free from the stillness and bolted toward her. A second, smaller figure lurked nearby on a bench. A boy, thin and undesigned by childhood comfort. Jaden Cruz, though Noah didn't yet know his name, wore a gray hoodie so worn the elbows had begun to fray. His cargo pants were smeared with salt stains from icy sidewalks, and his shoes were mismatched at the soles. His dark hair stuck out in patches as if cut by himself under poor lighting. And his eyes, large, deep brown, and far too old for his age, tracked every movement the little girl made. He wasn't afraid of the dogs sprinting toward them. Instead, he watched with the tense, knowing stare of someone who had seen this kind of collapse before. Someone who understood pain before he understood. Safety. Before Noah could close the distance, the little girl slid off the swing and collapsed onto her knees, her red coat splaying out like a spilled rose onto the snow. She wasn't screaming. She wasn't crying. Not even a gasp, though her face contorted with agony. Silence. Total, absolute silence continued to surround her. And that terrified Noah far more than any sound could. He ran, boots crunching deep into the snow, but Jaden reached her first, crouching beside her with gentle, almost practiced motions. Jaden's voice shook, but held a decisive edge when he spoke. Her ear. It's blocked. Just like... He swallowed, eyes flicking sideways, as if unsure whether he had permission to say more. Just like the man I helped the other night, but worse, way worse. His breath came out in white puffs, and though his hands trembled, they hovered near her with surprising certainty. The last time I saw someone this bad, he didn't make it. Noah froze. Atlas stood in front of Jaden now, positioning himself protectively between the agent and the boy, as if the dog had suddenly decided Jaden belonged to them. The shepherd's golden brown eyes lifted to Noah's in a rare, piercing moment, almost human in their insistence. Trust him, they seemed to say. Don't be late again. Noah's chest tightened. Late. That word cut in a place he didn't like to touch, where memories of a domestic violence call gone wrong still lived. A child's muted sob, a door slamming, a report closed too early. But this girl, this moment, something in it felt impossibly familiar. Jaden gently lifted the girl's chin. Hey, can you hear me? Blink twice. She blinked once, then squeezed her eyes shut in pain. He turned to Noah. She needs help right now. Something stuck deep in her ear. Noah wanted to stop him, to assert authority, to remind everyone here, himself included, that he was the trained one. But Atlas stepped closer to Jaden again, brushing the boy's knee with his nose. The dog didn't growl, didn't warn. He simply positioned himself there as if saying, let him try. The wind picked up, shaking the branches overhead. Snowflakes whirled around them like white sparks. The tightening in Noah's chest deepened, carved through with dread and déjà vu. He didn't know why. Not yet. Just as Jaden reached toward the girl's ear, Atlas suddenly snapped his head to the right, staring into the tree line. His fur bristled, and he let out a low, rumbling growl. One Noah had only heard when Atlas recognized a scent from the past, a scent tied to violence, a scent tied to that night. Jaden froze, the girl whimpered, and Noah's breath turned to ice. Because Atlas wasn't growling at a person, he was growling at a memory, a scent lingering in the snow that had no business being here. It was the same scent Noah remembered from the apartment with the green door. The same scent associated with a file he was ordered to close. And suddenly, this little girl's pain wasn't just a medical emergency. It was a message. Jaden's hand steadied with the kind of courage that grows only in children who have had to survive adolescence without help. He removed his hoodie for a moment, revealing a thin frame and faint bruises he quickly hid again. He tore a strip from the lining and gently pressed it to the girl's cheek, calming her before attempting to angle her head toward the faint park light. My mom said ears are like puzzle pieces, he murmured, voice suddenly soft, as if explaining to a scared animal. Sometimes things get pushed in wrong. Sometimes they just need help finding the way out. Noah's jaw tightened. Not because Jaden was wrong, but because the boy spoke with the experience of someone who had spent more time helping strangers than being helped himself. Atlas leaned in, sniffing the girl's ear, then pawed the ground once. A signal. Noah nodded. All right, kid. I'll guide you. Tell me what you need. Jaden took a sharp breath and worked quickly. His fingers were cold, stiff, but his motions purposeful. When he finally withdrew the hardened blockage from the girl's ear, a dark, compacted lump that didn't look natural at all. Noah's stomach twisted. This wasn't simple wax. It was something else. Something packed. Forced, even. The girl gasped as sound rushed back to her. Her hands flew to her ears as snowfall, wind, Atlas's breathing, and Jaden's heartbeat all seemed to crash into her at once. She screamed. A tiny, raw sound. And then immediately began to cry into Jaden's shoulder. Before Noah could speak, a woman came sprinting from the far end of the park, boots slipping on the ice. Emily Parker, the girl's mother, was in her early 30s with auburn hair tied back hastily and dark circles carved under her eyes. She wore a long gray coat and a cream turtleneck that had seen better days, and her face held the kind of exhausted devotion found only in mothers who had raised their children in fear. She knelt beside the girl, pulling her close, her hands shaking violently as she stroked the child's hair. "Liv, baby, can you hear me? Liv, look at me." And then, through broken sobs, the girl whispered the first clear word Noah had heard from her. "Mom." Emily collapsed around her, trembling. Jaden backed away, as if afraid he had done something wrong by helping. Atlas nudged him gently with his nose, grounding him. Emily, overwhelmed, didn't notice Noah at first. But when she finally looked up and saw the FBI jacket, she froze. Her pupils shrank. Her breath hitched. A pulse of dread rippled through her expression. And then she whispered the sentence that fractured the last layer of quiet inside Noah. "This is just like the night it happened." The door slammed. Liv went silent, and he told me if I ever spoke of it, he'd come back. Jaden raised his head sharply, eyes widening. "The apartment with the green door?" he blurted before he could stop himself. Emily's face drained of color. Noah felt the ground tilt under him, and Atlas, whose hearing was sharper than any weapon, let out a warning growl that vibrated through the frozen soil. Noah didn't yet know how Jaden knew that place. He didn't know why Atlas recognized the scent. He didn't know how this little girl's suffering was tied to a case he'd been forced to forget. But he knew one thing with chilling certainty. This was no coincidence. Tonight, winter had opened a wound the world had failed to heal. And Noah, who had once been too late, refused to let silence win again. At that moment, he felt unmistakably that they had not just stumbled upon a child in distress. They had stepped into the beginning of a storm. And as he gathered Emily, Liv, Jaden, and Atlas close, he whispered something only the night could hear. "Lord, guide us through whatever this is." If you believe in second chances, in angels walking among us, sometimes on 2 legs, sometimes on 4, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. Miracles happen when we walk together. The hospital room smelled faintly of antiseptic and warm air drifting from an old heating vent. Olivia Liv Parker lay under a white blanket, her small frame barely creating a rise beneath the fabric. Her red coat, still dusted with snow from the park, hung over a chair nearby, glowing like a warning flare in the dim light. Nurses passed by every few minutes, each carrying thick stacks of charts, but none thicker than Liv's. Her medical file was so heavy, the young nurse who brought it in had to lift it with both arms, her brow furrowing as she placed it on the counter with a soft thud. The diagnosis sheet on top remained unchanged after years. Hearing loss of unidentified origin. Emily Parker sat beside her daughter, her posture stiff, hands clasped tightly in her lap. She was in her early 30s, slender, pale from stress rather than illness, with auburn hair pulled into a messy bun that revealed the strain in her delicate jawline. Her eyes looked hollow, as if they had memorized how to brace for impact long before they learned joy. She wore a long gray coat that still held the shape of the cold outside, and whenever someone walked into the room, her shoulders rose instinctively, bracing for something she couldn't name aloud. When Dr. Holden entered, a man in his late 50s with silver hair clipped neatly at the sides and glasses that always seemed slightly fogged at the corners, he greeted Emily with the slow caution of someone used to delivering bad news. His hands were gentle, though thick and work-worn, and his voice carried a softness that contrasted with the deep-lined seriousness across his forehead. "Mrs. Parker," he said, flipping through Liv's massive file. "We've reviewed everything. Audiology, scans, neurological tests. The same pattern since she was 2. No physical cause detected. No trauma we can identify." Emily nodded mechanically. She lost her hearing gradually," she repeated, her voice robotic, stripped of emotion. "Around 2 years old. But when Liv drifted into sleep, her breathing softening into small hums she seemed surprised to recognize." Emily slipped out into the hallway. Noah noticed her the moment she left the room. He had been standing near the nurse's station with Atlas lying at his feet, the shepherd's large black and tan body curled protectively beside him. Noah approached the door just as Emily pressed a hand against her chest, shutting her eyes in an effort to steady whatever storm was shaking inside her. Then the door at the far end of the corridor swung shut with a heavy metallic slam. Emily jolted violently, gasping. Her back hit the wall. Her fingers curled into her coat as if she were holding herself together by fabric alone. Noah stepped closer. "Emily, are you all right?" Her eyes, usually dim with exhaustion, flared wide with raw terror. She shook her head, unable to form words. Atlas rose, walking toward her slowly, his tail low, his ears pricked, but gentle. He nudged her hand with his nose, grounding her like he had done with victims before. Emily exhaled shakily. "She didn't lose her hearing slowly," she whispered, staring at the floor as if afraid it might shatter beneath her. "She used to call me. She used to say, 'Mom,' just like any toddler." Her lips trembled. Until that night. Noah waited, letting the silence speak for her when she couldn't. "The night he showed up drunk," Emily whispered, eyes flicking to the exit door that had slammed moments earlier. "He screamed, hit the door, kept hitting it, and when the door slammed the last time." She clutched her chest again. Liv went quiet, completely quiet. She didn't cry, she didn't react. She just stopped hearing. Noah's jaw tightened. That description matched too closely with a case he remembered, one he had been told to close without follow-up. A domestic disturbance, a missing woman, a toddler found sitting silently beside a broken doorframe. But the report had ended abruptly, with no suspect identified and no explanation. "Emily," he asked gently, "did you ever tell anyone what happened?" She shook her head fiercely. "He said if I reported him, he'd come back and live. She never heard anything again, so she couldn't tell anyone. I thought maybe it was a trauma response. But the doctors found nothing. Nothing." Atlas paced suddenly, turning in a tight circle, nose pointed toward the hallway leading to Liv's room. Noah watched him carefully. The dog's instincts were rarely wrong. And right now, Atlas seemed to detect something, fear, memory, or maybe a faint scent carried in from the girl's red coat. Atlas froze. His ears snapped upward, his tail straightened, and he stared at Liv's closed hospital door with an expression Noah had only seen once before. Years ago, on the night of the green door case. He let out a low, rumbling growl, not at a person, not at a sound, at a scent drifting from inside the room, a scent Noah knew. a scent that should not exist here. Emily stiffened. That smell, she whispered. It was in my house that night. Noah felt the cold seep deeper into his bones. This wasn't an isolated medical mystery. It was a buried crime pulling itself back to the surface. When Noah and Emily returned to Liv's bedside, they found her awake, a small smile playing at the corners of her mouth as she listened. Actually listened to the faint beeping of the machine beside her. Her brown eyes glimmered with a mixture of wonder and fear. She lifted her hand slightly, pointing to Noah's shoes crunching lightly against the tile. That sound, it's sharp. Emily collapsed into a chair, tears pooling silently. Baby, you can hear that? Liv nodded. And I can hear him. She pointed toward Atlas. The shepherd perked up, offering her a soft whine that made her giggle in disbelief. Jaden arrived moments later, escorted by a social worker, a woman in her early 40s named Marcia Sullivan, with warm, dark skin, tired but kind eyes, and tightly curled hair pulled back into a neat bun. Marcia carried a clipboard and wore the expression of someone who had seen too many children fall through the cracks of society. This is the boy who responded at the park, she said gently. We need to ask him a few questions. Jaden shuffled into the room, his hoodie damp from melted snow. When Liv saw him, her face brightened. You helped me. Jaden shrugged, glancing down. You were hurting. Marcia's eyes softened at the simplicity of his explanation. Jaden has been on and off the system, she explained to Noah quietly. Foster homes, shelters. He tends to run away from places where he feels unsafe. Did he mention knowing anything about the Parkers? Noah asked. Marcia hesitated. Jaden sees things, notices things, but he rarely explains how. When Noah crouched beside him, Jaden tensed slightly, then forced himself to relax when Atlas laid his head on the boy's knee, as if to say, You're safe. Jaden, Noah said softly, earlier tonight, you mentioned a man who didn't survive. You said this felt like that. Can you tell me why? Jaden's eyes shifted. Fear, memory, guilt. Because the last time I saw someone with that same stuff in their ear, they weren't breathing by the time I found them. His voice thinned, and the door of that apartment, it was green and smashed in. Emily went pale, gripping the metal rail of Liv's bed. Noah felt his pulse spike. This was no coincidence. Jaden, Noah said steadily, I need you to tell me something. Did you ever see who hurt that man? Jaden swallowed hard. No, but I saw his boots, black leather, scar on the right toe, and the smell, like old beer and gasoline. Emily's breath hitched. That's him. That's exactly him. Noah stood slowly. The room felt too small now, too filled with old ghosts. Atlas walked to the doorway, sitting upright, staring down the hall as if expecting someone or something to appear. His tail was perfectly still, eyes sharp, heart sensing the storm before it arrived. The past, it seemed, was no longer content staying buried. As the tension simmered, Liv tugged at Noah's sleeve. Agent Noah? She whispered. Will the man who broke our door come back? Noah knelt beside her, forcing stability into his tone. Not if I have anything to say about it. She nodded, trusting him in that simple, instinctive way children trust heroes they choose before they fully understand danger. Emily wiped her cheeks. What happens now? Noah glanced at Atlas. The dog gave a single sharp exhale, the kind he used when tracking was required. Now, Noah said, we find out who tried to steal your daughter's hearing and why. Outside, snow kept falling, blanketing the world in white, as if trying to hide the approaching darkness. But Noah knew better. Darkness didn't disappear just because winter covered it. Sometimes, darkness waited for the moment you finally turned to face it. If you believe in divine protection, in the quiet miracles God sends through the hands of strangers and loyal animals, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform, where stories of grace and courage continue to unfold. Jaden Cruz had never trusted memories. Pictures, faces, places, none of it ever stayed clear in his mind. But pain etched itself in him like frostbite. Permanent, sharp, unavoidable. At 12 years old, he carried more winter inside him than most men twice his age. Snowstorms had a way of wrapping around his life at its worst moments. The bus crash that took his mother, the night his father walked out, the endless evenings sleeping under awnings while flakes drifted down like quiet reminders that someone somewhere had warmth he didn't. But tonight, in the hospital room where Liv Parker slept with monitors pulsing around her, Jaden found himself remembering something he didn't expect. Warmth. A different warmth. A weight pressing over him in the snow, not crushing, but protecting. The memory flickered behind his eyes, like the glow of a distant fire. He saw snow, orange smoke, broken glass, and the outline of a German shepherd whose breath fogged in the air above him as if saying, "Stay with me, kid." Now, that same dog, Atlas, was lying beside him on the hospital floor, head resting on his paws, watching Jaden with an intensity that made the boy's throat tighten. Atlas was 5 years old, large and broad-shouldered for a German shepherd, with a striking black and tan coat and an unusual silver patch on his chest in the shape of an uneven crescent. His amber eyes were gentle but sharp, carrying a wisdom that made people whisper things like K9 intuition or he sees souls, not faces. But Jaden didn't see intuition. He saw recognition, and it scared him. Noah Reddick watched the boy carefully from across the room. The FBI agent stood with arms crossed, his navy cold-weather jacket unzipped enough to reveal the old watch he always wore. A gift from someone long lost, though Noah never spoke of it. His brown hair, streaked with gray strands at the temples, was still wet from melting snow. A faint scar on his cheek caught the fluorescent light when he moved, the mark of a past case he didn't talk about anymore. Noah noted how Jaden sat on the visitor's couch, not restlessly like most kids his age, but still, almost frozen in place, as if afraid that moving would shatter the fragile space around him. "You said you've helped someone with a blockage before." Noah kept his voice calm even. "How did you know what to do this time?" Jaden shrugged inside his worn gray hoodie, tugging the sleeves over hands that had grown calloused from too many tasks performed for scraps. "It looked the same, I guess." "What did?" "The way her head tilted, the pressure, how she kept touching her right ear." He swallowed hard. Just like the man from the diner alley. He couldn't hear anything for days. I helped him. And he cried when he could hear again. Noah studied him, not with suspicion, but with something closer to awe. Kids like Jaden weren't supposed to notice details most adults missed. But Jaden wasn't most kids. His life had forced him to watch people for survival, their needs, their anger, their cracks. Emily Parker entered quietly, holding a cup of coffee she wasn't drinking. She looked exhausted but softer now, as if the storm inside her had settled enough to let light through. "Jaden," she said gently, "I never got to thank you." Jaden shook his head. "You don't have to." "But I do," Emily insisted, "because if you hadn't been there tonight, Liv." Her voice fractured. She pressed her hand over her mouth. "You saved her." Jaden's shoulders tightened, as if praise were a weight he didn't know how to carry. Atlas got up, trotted to the boy, and nudged under his arm again. Jaden hesitated, then let his hand rest on the dog's warm fur. The silver patch rose and fell with each breath. That tiny warmth unlocked another memory. Snow, screams, fire, a strong arm pulling him from the wreckage, something heavy shielding him, a bark that echoed through the storm. Jaden blinked hard. His voice came out barely audible. "Agent Noah, can I ask something weird?" "Go ahead. Has Atlas always worked with you?" Noah frowned, surprised. "Since he was a year old? Why?" Jaden hesitated, eyes lowering to the dog. "Because I think I met him before tonight." Atlas lifted his head suddenly and placed one paw, deliberate, gentle, unmistakable, onto Jaden's knee. His amber eyes locked onto the boy's with an emotion no one could name. Emily gasped softly. Noah froze, and Jaden whispered, voice trembling, "He was there, on the night my mom died." The monitor beside Liv beeped sharply, as if the room itself reacted to the confession. Atlas didn't look away. The shock lingered like frost on glass. Noah crouched beside Atlas, placing a steadying hand on the dog's collar. "Jaden, the bus crash that killed your mother. Where were you when it happened?" Jaden's breathing quickened. "It was winter. There was ice on the road. The bus flipped. People were screaming. I was stuck under a seat. Then someone grabbed me." Tears gathered at the corners of his eyes, rare, reluctant. "But before that person lifted me, a dog covered me with his body. I remember his fur, the warmth, and the way he growled at the fire like he was fighting it." Emily pressed a hand to her chest. "Got it." Noah's throat tightened. He remembered that call, years ago. A burning bus, multiple casualties, a toddler found under the body of a man who died trying to shield him. But he didn't remember a detail that now felt impossibly important. "Jaden," he said slowly, "in that memory, do you remember the shape of a silver patch? On the dog's chest?" Jaden nodded. "It looked like a crooked moon." Atlas stepped closer and touched his nose to Jaden's forehead. Jaden broke, not loudly, not dramatically. Just silently folded into Atlas's fur as if his heart recognized a place it had once belonged. Emily wiped her eyes. No one deserves to lose a mother like that. Noah looked away briefly. He had seen too many children lose more than childhood. But fate, God, whatever force tied stories together, had just braided Jaden and Atlas's paths long before tonight. "Why didn't anyone tell me?" Jaden whispered. "Because," Noah said quietly, "sometimes the world forgets to tell children the parts of the story where they mattered." They sat together in the soft hum of machines and winter wind pressing against the windows. Liv stirred in bed, eyes opening a sliver. "Jaden?" she murmured, recognizing his voice now. He wiped his face quickly. "Yeah." "You're loud," she whispered. "I like it." Jaden let out a shaky laugh, his first real laugh in months. Noah exhaled, feeling the story shift beneath them. The case wasn't just about Liv anymore. It wasn't just about a man slamming a door or a blocked ear canal. It was bigger, older, twisted through lives before they even realized it. And somewhere out there, the man who had terrorized Emily, who had left Liv in silence, who had once shattered a green door in another forgotten case. He was still living his life unbothered. Not for long. Noah stood, his expression sharpening. "Jaden, Emily, things are connected in ways we don't fully understand yet. But we'll face what's coming, with truth and with help." Emily nodded. "What happens next?" Atlas moved to the doorway again, staring down the hall with his tail stiff, his ears locked forward. Noah followed the dog's gaze. "Next," he said. "We stop running from the past." Snow swirled outside the window like the world was turning a page. If you believe God sends help through unlikely heroes, strangers, children, loyal animals, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform for more stories of grace and miracles. For a moment, the hospital room felt far too small to contain what had just happened. Sound had crashed into Liv Parker's world like a tidal wave, filling every inch of silence she had lived in for 6 long years. Her tiny hands flew to her ears as if she were trying to hold the universe still. Her breath caught, faltered, and then broke into a trembling sob of astonishment. "Mom," she whispered, raw, stunned, rediscovering her own voice for the first time she could remember. "Mom, I hear you." Emily Parker collapsed forward as though her bones had dissolved. She wrapped her arms around her daughter with desperate, shaking hands, burying her face in Liv's hair. The sound of her child's voice, clear, alive, undeniable, shattered her. Years of fear, guilt, exhausted nights, and unanswered prayers surged through her all at once. She tried to speak, but emotion strangled the words in her throat. Atlas stepped closer in a slow, reverent circle, his tail low, his breath soft against Liv's arm. His eyes held the steady alertness of a guardian who understood instinctively that something sacred had been restored. Noah stood beside him, unable to look away. The moment burned into him like a mark on the soul. He had seen miracles before, rescues, survivals, strange instincts, but nothing like this. A barefoot boy, a simple extraction, and a child hearing her mother's heartbeat again. Emily clung to Liv, and a whisper slipped out of her without warning, weak, fractured, unguarded. "It's just like that night." Her gaze drifted somewhere distant. The door slammed so hard, and she fell silent. "He told me if I said a word, he'd come back." The sentence struck the room like a dropped weight. Noah's breath stopped mid-inhale. His fingers curled slowly at his sides. A cold shiver crawled across the back of his neck. He recognized the voice Emily was speaking with, the voice of trauma leaking past composure. He had heard that tone before, in another apartment, with another door, another child who went silent after the slam. Jaden, who had been sitting at the foot of the bed, jerked upright. His eyes sharpened instantly, narrowing as if he were staring at a ghost. "Miss Emily, the apartment, was it the one with the green door?" Color drained from Emily's face. She stared at him, frozen. "How? How do you know that?" The air thickened, heavy, cold, electric. Noah felt something twist deep inside his chest. He saw fragments of that old case flash before him. A domestic disturbance brushed off as routine. A terrified woman on the phone, a toddler too quiet. A green door cracked at the hinges, a suspect who vanished. A supervisor ordering him to stand down. A file closed too early. A night Noah never truly forgot. Atlas emitted a low, guttural growl. Not a warning, but recognition. The dog stepped toward Emily, sniffing the hem of her coat as if picking up strands of fear woven into the fabric. Then he turned sharply toward Jaden, nose brushing the boy's sleeve, tracing an invisible link between 2 separate wounds. His tail rose, stiff with instinct. For a moment, the world stilled. He sat, rigid, eyes locked on Noah with a message only a canine partner could deliver. It's him. The same man. The same scent. The same night. Noah forced his voice steady. "Emily, tell me everything about that door. Everything you remember." Emily stroked Liv's hair absent-mindedly, grounding herself in the steady rise and fall of her daughter's breathing. It was painted green, old, chipped. He slammed it so hard the whole frame shook. Liv cried, and then she just stopped. I tried to call for help, but he shoved me. He said if I ever reported him, he'd come back. Jaden trembled. 3rd floor, green door, the man who smelled like gasoline. His voice thinned. Oh God, I've seen him. Emily spun toward him, panic blazing in her eyes. Where? Where did you see him? Jaden flinched at her desperation. Under the overpass, near the bus stop, before my mom's accident, he yelled at people. He always smelled like beer and gasoline. Emily's hand struck the metal bed rail as she trembled uncontrollably. Noah stepped back, exhaling slowly. The dots weren't just connecting. They were forming a map. A green door, a violent man, a silenced toddler, a blocked ear mimicking a previous case. 2 children tied together by the same shadow that had slipped through the cracks of Reno's winter. He felt sick that he had ever closed that file. Then the hospital door creaked open. A young nurse entered. Hannah Moreno, early 20s, olive skin, dark hair pulled into a precise bun. Her big, expressive eyes softened the fatigue lingering on her face. She carried a tray of supplies. Sorry to interrupt, she said gently, pausing when she sensed the tension. The doctor asked me to check Liv's vitals. Noah nodded stiffly. We're just talking. Unaware of the emotional wreckage in the room, Hannah moved tenderly around the bed. Her movements were delicate, careful not to overwhelm Liv's newly awakened senses. Jaden watched her with a rare sense of calm, comforted by her quiet presence. After finishing, she smiled at Emily. Your daughter is doing incredibly well. Children often adapt faster than adults. She's stronger than she looks. Then she slipped out. Noah turned back to Emily and Jaden. We need to find this man, and fast. Emily's voice quivered. Are we safe here? Atlas answered first. The dog moved to the doorway and lay across it like a living barricade, muscles coiled, gaze iron sharp. No one would have dared test him. Noah placed a steady hand on Emily's shoulder. I'll protect both of you. That's a promise. Jaden swallowed. Agent Noah, if he comes after Miss Emily, will he come after me too? This wasn't fear speaking. It was responsibility, guilt, the belief that he had unknowingly carried a piece of the puzzle that threatened them all. Noah knelt so they were eye to eye. You're not alone anymore, and you are not responsible for what a grown man did. You hear me? Jaden held his gaze, and for the first time seemed to let himself accept those words. Emily gently pulled the boy into her arms, protective, without hesitation. It surprised Noah how naturally they fit together. 3 people bruised by the same darkness, leaning toward the same fragile light. Liv stirred, blinking awake. Mom, she whispered. Why is everyone sad? Emily kissed her forehead. Because we love you, and because God sent people to help us tonight. Liv smiled softly and reached toward Atlas. He nuzzled into her palm with a tenderness that tightened Noah's throat. Whatever storm waited outside these walls, they would face it together. And this time, the green door would not be the last word. If you believe God sends miracles through people, and sometimes through the loyal animals who guard us, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform so more hearts can find hope again. The hallway outside Liv's room felt colder than it should have. Not because the hospital was drafty, but because Jaden Cruz sat alone on the plastic chair beneath the flickering fluorescent light, shrinking into his damp hoodie as if trying to make himself invisible again. His knees were pulled close, the fabric soaked from melted snow, and his fingers twisted together until the knuckles whitened. People hurried past him, doctors, nurses, orderlies. Yet none seemed to notice the small boy curling into the shadows like he'd spent his whole life doing just that. Jaden wasn't afraid of the dark. He was afraid of the moments right before someone decided they no longer needed him. He stared at the floor tiles and tried not to think, not to hope. Hoping was dangerous. Hoping made you think you belonged somewhere, until morning came and the world reminded you otherwise. He'd been through that cycle more times than he could stomach. A pair of heavy footsteps approached, deliberate but unthreatening. He knew them instantly. Noah's gait was distinct. Steady, weighted by responsibility, softened only when matched with the soft pads of Atlas walking beside him. Noah Reddick eased himself into the chair next to Jaden. The FBI agent didn't speak right away, didn't push or pry. He simply sat. Atlas, however, made the first move. The German shepherd lowered himself until his large frame pressed gently against Jaden's leg, his breath warm, his presence solid. Anchoring. Jaden swallowed. "I'm okay," he muttered, though his voice was too thin to be convincing. Noah rested his hands loosely on his knees. "You've had a long night." Jaden nodded, though the movement was barely a twitch. Noah turned his head to look at him fully. "Where were you planning to go after this?" Jaden shrugged without lifting his eyes. "I don't know. It's fine. Ngoi ta gyup chao mo joan thoima. I kung ban roy hoji tiep. Chao quen roy." The small, tired smile that accompanied those words didn't match the boy's age. It belonged to someone older, someone who had learned to accept temporary kindness the way others accepted spare change. Without expectation, without promise, Noah felt something inside him twist sharply, split open like an old wound that refused to close. He had heard children say heartbreaking things before, but this felt personal. Too personal. Because he had once watched a little girl suffer while he arrived too late. Because he once ran toward a warehouse to save his wife and found only silence and flashing lights. Because Atlas had once looked back at him with disappointment carved into the lines around his muzzle. As if the dog himself questioned why Noah hadn't been faster. There were failures you could live with, and failures that clung to your ribcage until breathing itself became a reminder. Noah exhaled slowly. "Jaden," he said, voice rougher than intended. "There are mistakes a man can survive once, maybe twice. But if he lets them happen again..." He paused, searching for the right words. He stops being able to look at himself in the mirror. Jaden glanced sideways, confused. Noah continued. "I don't want to be late again. Not for Liv, not for you." Atlas raised his head and placed his paw on Jaden's shoe, sealing the promise Noah couldn't yet articulate. The dog had a way of saying with one touch what humans struggled to with entire conversations. Before Jaden could respond, Emily stepped softly around the corner. She looked exhausted, her eyes swollen from crying, her gray coat wrinkled from hours of sitting, her auburn hair falling out of its bun. But when she saw Jaden, something in her face softened. She approached slowly, as one might approach a wounded animal who wasn't sure yet if he wanted help. "Jaden." Emily's voice was gentle, almost shy. "Liv voitinde, kao jiao tien con be hoi la." She hesitated, smiling through her tears. "An Jaden ju roy." Jaden's head snapped up, his mouth parted slightly in disbelief. Emily crouched to his level. "If you leave, I think she'd be heartbroken." Jaden didn't know what to do with that sentence. It wasn't shaped like the words he'd grown up hearing. He wasn't used to being someone worth looking for. His chest felt too tight. He blinked rapidly. Ko Cha Kong? She really said that? Emily nodded, brushing a tear from her cheek. Kon Bei Thuong Chao Roy? And she's not the only one. The hallway blurred at the edges as the emotion hit him. Heavy, unfamiliar, warm. No one had ever told him he mattered enough to miss. Jaden lowered his gaze again, his voice cracking. If I stay, would you? He looked up at Noah, eyes shining with fear he refused to name. Would you send me away later, when you don't need me anymore? The question shattered Noah, because it wasn't just fear, it was memory. Every abandoned night, every adult who said Tam Thoi Thoi. Every morning he woke up alone before he understood why. Noah leaned forward, forearms resting on his thighs. His voice softened in a way he rarely allowed. Jaden, the only person leaving, if anyone ever leaves, will be me, not you. He smiled faintly, pain tucked behind it. But this time I'm staying. Atlas pressed into Jaden's side with renewed insistence, as if adding a canine signature to Noah's vow. A sound drifted from down the hall, a soft chuckle. Liv, awake, amused by something Emily had said. Jaden's head snapped toward the sound, instantly, instinctively. The realization that he recognized her laugh, because he had helped bring it back into existence, hit him like a warm gust of wind on a frozen night. For the first time since entering the hospital, Jaden let himself breathe. Atlas suddenly stiffened. His ears shot upward, tail rising, muscles tensing beneath his black and tan coat. He stared down the hallway, into nothing visible, and let out a quiet, warning rumble. Noah rose instantly. What is it, boy? Jaden froze. Emily held her breath. Atlas took 3 steps forward, nose lifted, tasting the air. Then he growled, low, primal, unmistakable. The same growl he'd given outside the Green Door apartment years ago. Noah felt the blood drain from his face. Someone with a familiar scent had been here, and left, recently. Moments later, the tension eased, though Atlas's gaze remained locked toward the elevator hallway. Noah mentally filed the dog's reaction away. It wasn't random. It never was. Inside Liv's room, the little girl brightened the moment Jaden stepped inside. She sat up, red coat folded beside her bed like a loyal friend. Her hair was tousled from sleep, her eyes soft with wonder. Aunt Jaden, she whispered, savoring the sound. I can hear you. Jaden approached awkwardly. Yeah, he murmured. And I hear you too. Liv reached her hand toward him, small fingers trusting, fragile. Jaden took it gently, as if holding something rare. Emily watched the exchange, her heart tightening with gratitude. Noah stood at the doorway, arms crossed loosely, not out of defensiveness, but something resembling belonging. He watched Atlas settle at the bedside, resting his chin near Liv's knee, tail sweeping softly against the floor. It looked like a family forming. A strange one, a wounded one, but real. And Noah felt something in his chest loosen. A knot he'd carried for years eased just slightly. Later, as Emily tucked Liv's blanket, Jaden lingered beside Noah. So, if I stay, what happens next? Noah draped his jacket over the boy's shoulders. Next, he said quietly, we make sure that what happened to you, to Liv, to Emily, never happens again. Not on my watch. Jaden gripped the jacket with both hands, pulling it close as if it were armor. For once, he didn't look like he was waiting to be abandoned. He looked like a boy who was finally being kept. If you believe God brings the right people together at the right moment, even in the coldest nights, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform. for more stories of grace and protection. The cabin at the end of Juniper Lane did not look like a sanctuary for the wounded. Snow rested thick on its roof, the porch light flickered against the swirling wind, and the pines surrounding it stood like silent guardians. But inside, warmth gathered in fragile shapes. A mother afraid to sleep with the lights off. A boy who flinched at kindness. A little girl learning the world again, one sound at a time. A federal agent carrying scars he never confessed. And a German shepherd who seemed to understand all their suffering without needing a single word. Liv sat cross-legged on the living room rug, leaning close to the mug in Emily's hand. Her eyes widened every time the spoon touched ceramic. "It sounds like a tiny bell," she whispered, breath fogging slightly in the cool cabin air. Jaden sat beside her, patient and careful, explaining each sound with a gentleness that came from knowing what it was like to live in fear of surprises. "That's metal tapping a cup," he told her. "It's sharp, not dangerous. Kinda like when Atlas's tag rattles before he barks." Atlas lay stretched out beside them, his large body relaxed but alert, ears flicking toward every noise. Liv leaned close to his broad chest and giggled at the steady thump of his heartbeat. "It's like a drum," she said softly. "But softer." Emily watched from the doorway. She kept her arms wrapped around herself, not from cold, but from the overwhelming gratitude pressing against her ribs. Jaden's gentle explanations reminded her of her own mother once explaining thunderstorms to her when she was small. She saw that same tenderness now, in a boy who had spent more nights alone than any child should. In the kitchen, Noah moved with purposeful quiet. He wore his Navy FBI jacket open, sleeves rolled up, revealing the old bite scar near his wrist and the longer one from a broken bottle on his forearm. His movements were efficient, but his eyes drifted repeatedly toward the living room, not checking on safety, but checking on something he didn't know how to name yet. Juniper Lane was peaceful outside. Inside, sound had become something holy. Liv closed her eyes and listened to the faint patter of snow hitting the roof. "It's like someone knocking gently," she murmured. Jaden smiled, a rare, unguarded smile. "Most people don't notice it," he said. "Snow makes noise, but you have to listen closely." "I hear everything," Liv said proudly. "Even your laugh." Jaden blinked, startled that she remembered it, that she wanted to. But not every sound was gentle. Later that night, the wind rose sharply. It circled the cabin like a restless animal, whistling through the pine branches and rattling loose shutters. Noah checked the doors twice before settling on the couch with a tired sigh. Liv lay beneath a blanket near the fireplace, Atlas curled protectively beside her. Jaden sat upright on the floor, wary, listening. Then the storm struck. A violent gust slammed the back door. Bang! The house shook. Liv screamed and crumpled to the floor, clutching her ears as if the sound itself burned. She curled into a tight ball, rocking, whispering words broken by terror. "That's the sound. The night he hit the door. The night everything went quiet. Mom, make it stop." Emily rushed forward, her knees hitting the floor as she pulled Liv into her arms. Tears streamed down her face, her voice shaking. "It's okay, sweetheart. It's just the wind. No one is here. You're safe." But Liv couldn't hear safety. She only heard memory. Jaden froze. Breath caught in his throat. The slam had carved open his own past. The cracked green door, the shouted curses, the stairwell where he'd crouched and wished himself invisible. His hands dug into the rug, knuckles white. Noah sprang to his feet. His heart pounded painfully, not from fear of an intruder, but from the realization that he had never truly understood how deeply this trauma lived inside these children. Atlas reacted next. The German shepherd rose to his full height, fur bristling, a low growl rising from his chest, like a warning from the earth itself. His amber eyes fixed on the back door, not with curiosity, but with recognition. His posture was not one of a dog startled by wind. It was a soldier remembering the scent of an enemy. Noah knew it instantly. Easy, boy, easy. But Atlas wasn't reacting to danger outside. He was reacting to a memory alive inside the smell of the storm. Atlas crept toward the back door with deliberate steps. He sniffed the lower edge of the wood, drawing in short, sharp breaths. Then he recoiled, not in fear, but in certainty. He turned to Noah and gave a single, low growl, the kind he only used when identifying a scent from a past case. Jaden whispered, voice trembling. That's the exact sound he made the night the bus caught fire. Liv buried her face in Emily's chest, and Noah understood. The past hadn't brushed against their lives. It had come back to the doorstep. Hours later, when the storm had quieted and the house breathed again, Noah retreated to the small study at the back of the cabin. He locked the door behind him and sat heavily at the old oak desk, where dust collected on books he hadn't opened since before his marriage ended. He reached for the metal box on the top shelf, a box he had avoided for years. Inside lay the evergreen case. The file was thinner than it should have been. Cases involving injured children should have been thick. Photos, interviews, follow-up reports. But this one carried only a few sheets, stamped with the red words, "Closed by redirect order." He hated those words. They meant someone decided another case was more important, that a child's trauma could wait. Noah opened the file. There was the 911 transcript, distorted screaming, an operator asking the caller to repeat the apartment number, a door slam heard over the line, a child crying once, then going silent. He flipped to the sketch, a broad man in a dark bomber jacket, scruffy beard, narrow, angry eyes. Lucas Harlan, 34 at the time, possibly in his early 40s now, unstable, violent, a history of drunk outbursts and intimidation. Last known address, Evergreen Apartments, Unit 3B, green door, hinges damaged. A note at the bottom read, "Follow-up recommended, but not approved." Noah exhaled through clenched teeth. This was not a forgotten case. It had been buried. Emily appeared quietly at the doorway. Her gray sweater hung loosely over her frame, her hair falling from its tie. Her eyes were tired, swollen, but steady. "Jaden told me you were remembering something tonight." "I was." Noah nudged the file slightly toward her. "I should have stopped him years ago." She shook her head gently. "You didn't close this case. But I didn't fight hard enough to keep it open." Emily stepped closer, her voice soft but firm. "You're fighting now." He met her eyes, deep, pained, determined. "I'll find him," he said. "I promise you, Emily. I will not let him hurt any of you again." She swallowed hard. "I believe you." Atlas entered the room, placing himself beside Noah, pressing his head against the agent's knee. Jaden appeared behind him, holding Noah's jacket the way children hold shields. "We're a team now, right?" Jaden asked, voice fragile but hopeful. Noah rested one hand on the dog and one on the boy's shoulder. "Yeah," he said. "We are." Outside, the night was quiet again, but the quiet didn't comfort Noah anymore. Somewhere out there, Lucas Harlan was still alive, and the sound of him had returned. If you believe God sends protection through unexpected people, and even through loyal animals, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform, so these stories of grace can reach more hearts. News travels quickly in small towns, especially stories that sound like miracles. By morning, the local paper had already run a headline about the little girl who suddenly regained her hearing after years of silence. A blurry photo of Emily holding Liv, both wrapped in winter coats, both smiling through exhaustion, circulated on evening broadcasts. The story was meant to be heartwarming. But somewhere else in the city, in a dim apartment stained with old cigarette smoke and peeling paint, a man watched the broadcast with growing rage. Lucas Harlan sat hunched on a threadbare couch, a half-crushed beer can dangling from his fingers. His hair was greasy, beard untrimmed and patchy, eyes small and sunken beneath heavy brows. His shoulders were large, his frame thick with the kind of strength that came from anger rather than discipline. When Liv's face appeared on screen, followed by Emily's, Lucas's expression warped into something feral. "They're still alive," he muttered, voice gravelly. "Still smiling." The reporter mentioned nothing of him. Nothing of Evergreen Apartments, nothing of the night he had slammed a green door hard enough to shake the walls. But the fact they were on the news at all was enough. Lucas threw the beer can across the room. It hit the wall with a metal clatter and rolled beneath the radiator. "Time to finish what I started," he growled. The biggest snowstorm of the season hit that night. Wind howled like something with teeth, clawing at the edges of Juniper Lane as if trying to pry its way inside. Power lines flickered, lights dimmed and brightened again, shadows danced across the walls of the wooden cabin. Noah had been called to emergency duty, a decision he hated but couldn't refuse. Even as he shrugged into his coat, his mind stayed anchored to the cabin, to Emily and Liv, to Jaden and Atlas. He paused at the doorway, glancing back at the living room where everyone was gathered. "I'll be gone only a couple of hours," he said. "Stay inside. Keep the doors locked." Emily nodded, though her fingers trembled. Jaden kept Atlas close, one hand buried in the thick fur of the German shepherd's neck. Atlas nudged Noah's hand, clearly unhappy. "I know, boy," Noah whispered. "I'll be back." But the storm had its own plans. Hours later, snow blanketed the porch so thick the steps vanished beneath it. The sky had turned the color of ash. Emily placed extra blankets near the fire, keeping Liv close. Jaden sat near the window, watching the snow swirl like ghosts outside. Atlas paced. He walked from the back door to the front, back to the kitchen, then to the hallway, over and over again. His gait was stiff, deliberate, his ears pinned forward. His hackles were raised, tail rigid. Every few minutes he stopped, lifted his head, and drew in a long, slow breath through his nose. Emily swallowed nervously. "Is he restless because of the storm?" Jaden shook his head. "No, he smells something." The lights flickered once, then twice, then died for a full second. That was all the warning they got. The back door burst open. A wave of icy air slammed into the cabin, carrying snow, the stench of stale alcohol, leather worn by sweat, and something far darker, the smell Atlas remembered from years ago. A broad silhouette filled the doorway, blocking the wind like a wall. Lucas Harlan stepped inside, boots cracking ice underfoot. His bomber jacket was soaked, his breath sharp with beer, his eyes focused with chilling precision. Angela Parker gasped, grabbing Liv instinctively. Liv clung to her mother, her ears ringing with the sudden roar of the wind, the heavy footsteps on the wood, the heartbeat of her own fear. Atlas exploded into a snarl so deep it vibrated the floorboards. "Get away from them," Emily choked out. Lucas ignored her. He lunged, his hand clamped around Emily's arm, jerking her backward so violently she stumbled. Liv screamed as Lucas grabbed her by the back of her sweater, dragging her as if she weighed nothing. "You thought you could run forever?" he hissed. "You thought I wouldn't find you?" Jaden crouched behind the staircase, heart hammering so violently he thought it might burst from his chest. Every instinct told him to stay hidden, to freeze the way he had as a child behind the green door. He remembered that hallway, the cold steps, the man looking down at him, eyes full of drunken contempt. He remembered staying silent. This time, silence would kill them. His hands shook as he lifted the phone Noah had lent him. His thumb hovered, trembling, then pressed the call button. The line clicked. "Jaden?" Noah answered immediately, breath sharp. "He's here," Jaden whispered, voice breaking. "Lucas, at the cabin. Don't be late this time." Atlas launched himself forward. Not blindly, not out of rage, but with a terrifying, controlled precision. He placed himself between Lucas and the children, teeth bared, a growl like thunder reverberating in his chest. Liv heard everything, the scrape of boots, the slam of bodies, the sharp intake of Emily's breath. And for the first time, she understood sound not as noise, but as survival. Her new hearing, newly restored, would save them. The storm swallowed the sound of sirens as Noah sped toward Juniper Lane, lights slicing through the white fury. He radioed backup, heart pounding with a mixture of terror and determination. He had promised Jaden he wouldn't be late again. This time, he meant it. Inside the cabin, chaos twisted between shadows and snow. Lucas stumbled as Atlas forced him backward, teeth snapping inches from his arm. The dog moved like a shadow, like judgment itself, protecting Emily and the children with ferocity carved from every trauma he'd witnessed. Liv shouted through tears, describing every sound she heard. "He's moving toward the kitchen. His boots are scraping the floor. Mom, he's picking something up, hot metal. I think it's the fireplace poker." Jaden relayed her words to the 911 operator, voice steady despite his shaking. "Liv can hear what we can't see. She's telling us what he's grabbing. Send Noah faster." Outside, boots crushed through the snow. Then the door burst open. Noah entered like a force of winter itself, gun raised, jaw clenched. His eyes locked on Lucas just as the man swung the metal poker toward Atlas. "Drop it," Noah roared. Lucas turned, just in time to see the barrel of the gun. But Atlas moved faster. He lunged, knocking Lucas off balance, sending the poker spinning across the floor. Within moments, officers swarmed the cabin. Snow blew inside as they wrestled Lucas to the ground, handcuffing him while he screamed threats too slurred to matter. Emily collapsed to her knees, pulling Liv into her arms. Jaden leaned against the wall, trembling with relief. Atlas walked to Noah, rested his head against his leg, and closed his eyes. Finally at peace. Everything that had broken them had converged in one night, and everything that would heal them began there too. Lucas was taken into custody. The Evergreen case was reopened. Emily no longer flinched at doors slamming. Liv no longer feared sound. She used it to protect others. Jaden was no longer the boy trembling behind the stairs, and Noah Reddick was no longer a man who arrived too late. Weeks later, Noah created a small program within his unit. Officially, it was unnamed. Unofficially, everyone called it Atlas Law. The rule was simple. If a homeless or forgotten child crossed paths with a canine like Atlas, and the dog chose to stop, every adult in the room was required to stop too. It was a joke at first, then it wasn't. Children began arriving at the Juniper Lane cabin. Kids who had slipped through the cracks, kids who had been silenced, ignored, or unseen. Atlas lay on the porch each night, watching them with half-lidded eyes, his silver chest patch glowing under the porch light like a mark of destiny. And if there truly were guardian angels for children the world had forgotten, they looked a lot like a 5-year-old German shepherd with a scar on his nose and a promise in his heartbeat. If you believe God sends the right protectors at the right moment, and sometimes those protectors have fur and 4 paws, please like, comment, and subscribe to Angels in Uniform for more stories of grace and courage. In the end, this story is a reminder that miracles rarely arrive with fanfare. Sometimes they appear in the form of a child who refuses to give up, a mother who protects with every breath, or a loyal dog who stands where angels cannot be seen. And sometimes God works through the smallest moments: a sound restored, a door defended, a hand reaching back just when hope feels lost. If this story touched you, share it with someone who may need a reminder that grace still finds us, even in the storms we fear most. Leave a comment below, subscribe to the channel, and join us in praying that God watches over every broken heart, every wandering soul, and every home that needs His light tonight. May He bless you for being here, for listening, and for believing that goodness still rises in this world.